All right, guys, welcome back to the show. We are here with the one and only Andrew Yang. Thanks so much for coming on.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, I was just commenting on how much of a startup vibe this is. I love it. I mean, people are quiet right now, but before people were sitting on the floors and it looks a little uncomfortable, but it's definitely lively here.
Well, this campaign is very much a startup. And as a serial entrepreneur, I have to admit it feels very familiar.
I'm sure, yeah. I mean, what's it like now transitioning from your entrepreneurship life into something that's completely different, right? You kind of have to watch what you say, and there's a lot of publicity on you, really. And what's that transition been like in terms of a mindset for you?
I've enjoyed it a great deal because what we're doing with this campaign is hopefully raising awareness to the fact that we are in the midst of the greatest technological and economic transition in human history, where we're automating away millions of jobs right before our eyes. And the opportunity to go to people and say, look, it's not your imagination, but we really did automate away 4 million manufacturing jobs. We're going to do the same thing to the truck drivers, the retail workers, the call center workers, and on and on. And the great thing is Americans are waking up to this reality, where now 70% of Americans agree that we're going to eliminate many more jobs than we're going to create over the next 10 years. And so making that transition has actually been quite easy and painless, because right now I'm just going around telling people the truth. And it's been incredible how receptive people have been to the fact that we need to make big changes.
Right, and this isn't something that is relatively new that you've been talking about. I saw a TED Talk where you've been talking about this for about 5 years now, possibly even longer. So this is just about time that you're really publicizing this.
Well, my thinking on this has evolved, where I started an organization, Venture for America, that I'm incredibly proud of. I mean, it trains hundreds of young entrepreneurs around the country, and I know you were involved with a similar organization. Yeah. But I've realized that technology is outpacing our institutions and our ability to educate and train people, where entrepreneurship is going to be great and we need much, much more of it, but the changes are much more extreme and they're coming much more quickly than I would have realized a few years ago.
And I mean, and we'll definitely have a lot of time to get back into artificial intelligence and how that's going to impact the economy. But I do want to go back into your childhood and the book, The War on Normal People. You start out talking about how, as someone that is a minority, you had a tough time and you faced bullying. This is something that I personally struggle with a lot. And, I've been called everything, Gook, like everything you can imagine.
Well, didn't you grow up in Vancouver? I thought there were a lot of Asians there.
I did, but I came from South Korea. So when I didn't really know English even, this was something that I definitely struggled with. And I actually lived in South America, where like every couple of blocks you hear Chino. And it's real for a lot of people that are coming in. So I'm curious to know, and King Chi is a mutual friend of ours that introduced us. And when he actually first brought up the fact that you're running for president, I was like, okay, like what's his name? I look it up and he said Andrew Yang. I was like, wait a minute, this guy's Asian? I've never heard of an Asian American trying to run for president. So are you actually the first person to run as an Asian American?
Well, I'm the first Asian American man to run as a Democrat. There was an Asian American peace candidate in the 70s, congresswoman from Hawaii, and then Bobby Jindal ran as a South Asian governor on the Republican side,
right,
in 2012. But I am the first Asian American man to run for president as a Democrat.
That's amazing. And this type of thinking is certainly what we need in the economy, for sure. But I'd love to kind of deconstruct the inner ambition that you had in order to kind of make these kind of decisions in your career. When you talk to any entrepreneur, they always have a chip on their shoulder, right?
Yes.
So talk to me a little bit about if you have any of those in your childhood or growing up, and how that's impacted a lot of the decisions you make.
Well, I was one of the only Asian kids in my town in upstate New York. And certainly, like my classmates reminded me of the fact that I was one of the only Chinese or Asian kids around very, very often. Yeah. And so when you're young, that's hard and you end up responding to it in different ways. So I definitely had a chip on my shoulder. I also skipped a grade, so I was smaller and younger and wimpier than most of my classmates for a long time. So those two things together always made me feel like an underdog, and I've always taken pride in trying to stick up for the little guy or the underdog as a result.
And now transitioning from, you decided to take a traditional career as a lawyer.
Yes, I was a lawyer for 5 months.
And you quit in 5 months, like right away?
Well, I had a few things I realized. One, that I didn't want to do this job forever.
Mm-hmm.
And two, that it was going to get harder to quit, not easier. So if those two things are true, then you should quit as soon as you can. And so I thought, okay, I should quit as soon as possible. So I quit after working as an attorney for 5 months, and I co-founded a .com that crashed and burned in the first .com bubble in 2001.
And that was Star Giving, I believe?
Yes. It was a very .com 1.0 idea. It was a fundraising site for celebrity-affiliated nonprofits. It was a hybrid of something called a hunger site and then celebrity giving. Right now, there's a company that does something similar called omaze.com. So I was approximately 18 years ahead of my time.
Wow. So this is just like a timing thing, like most companies.
Yeah, well, many entrepreneurs will tell you that that a lot of it's the team and the execution. So even if the idea had been right, I'm not sure if my team was the right team at that point. I was quite young and very raw.
How old were you when you first started?
I was 25 when I started StarGiving.com. I had a co-founder who was a little bit older than me.
Right. And I know we're jumping around a little bit, but I remember reading that your dad had about 96 or 69 patents throughout his career.
Yeah, he's an engineer, a lab geek, an inventor.
I mean, like, what were all those patents on?
A lot of them were related on how to make liquid crystal displays smaller and flatter. So when he got started at GE in the 70s, no one wanted anything to do with liquid crystal displays. Like, it wasn't clear that there was any commercial potential there.
Right.
And so he took it, and then he ended up filing patent after patent on how to make them more compact. To a point when now, obviously, there are LCD screens everywhere, and then the next generation on top of that. So he's been working in display technologies for decades, since before it was cool.
Wow. And were there any specific lessons that either your mom or your dad has taught you that has impacted a lot of the decisions that you've made throughout your career?
Well, part of the chip on your shoulder you're talking about was that my parents gave me a couple lessons. One, you do not want your career to depend upon whether the person above you likes you. Like that's like a bad place to be.
Right.
And that was something that my dad pushed to us. The second thing was that if someone else can do it, you can do it too. And so one of the reasons I became an entrepreneur was I met other entrepreneurs, and I said, okay, well, if you're capable of this, then I'm capable of it too. So then I tried, and it turns out it was very hard. And my first company did not work out.
Right.
But then, like you, and I know you've had this experience where you get exposure, and then you want to do it again, and then you get stronger, you develop. So the way that I developed, and the way I think other people should develop, is by going to work in a strong team, which is what my organization, Venture for America, helps young aspiring entrepreneurs do.
Yeah, and I'd definitely love to talk more about that. We were just talking about Reza, who often says when he went from Canada and he started attending Harvard, there's this perception that you want to put a lot of these people on the pedestal, that they're a lot smarter than you, that they have a lot more experience. And something interesting that he mentioned was like, they're just like you. And if you work hard enough and if you can focus and strategically make decisions that are going to be better for your career, you can ultimately overcome a lot of these things that that most people think is above their pay grade. And this is kind of the opportunity that you're giving with Venture for America. So talk to us a little bit about VFA and what your mission is with the organization.
So it was 2009, and my education company was acquired by the Washington Post. And so I personally taught the analyst classes at Goldman Sachs and McKinsey. And I saw there were so many smart recent graduates who were doing jobs that they didn't really enjoy, and they weren't sure why they were there. And then they were hitting the reset button by going to business school and doing it all over again. And I thought, like, wow, we really need to improve on this somehow for the sake of everybody, because having all of your brain power doing the same stuff over and over again is not good for the economy or society. So I started a nonprofit in 2011, Venture for America, to help connect recent graduates with startups and early stage companies in Detroit, Cleveland, St. Louis, Baltimore, Cincinnati, and other cities around the country that could use the talent to grow these businesses and also weren't getting a lot of talent naturally. So that's what I've been doing that's what I did from 2011 to last year, was help build Venture for America.
Right.
And again, incredibly proud of everything that Venture for America continues to do. We've now helped recruit and train over 1,000 entrepreneurs, and they've gone on to create thousands of jobs. It's awesome work.
So you started this right after you sold your first company to Kaplan?
Well, technically, it was my third or fourth company, but it was the first company that worked out.
right.
So
The successful one. We won't talk about the other ones too much.
Yeah. I want to make clear that I had a few bumps and bruises.
Sure, yeah, amongst everyone. And is there like a specific lesson that you're trying to teach the entrepreneurs that perhaps the people that are listening, the aspiring entrepreneurs, can really take away, that if they didn't have the opportunity to participate in something like Venture for America, that they can still do this everywhere across the world?
Well, sure. So what we did with Venture for America is we put people into small team environments, and then we pushed an action orientation and execution with resources that are available to you. Because some of the traps that you get into as an entrepreneur is you always think, if I get more connections, money, resources, then I can do the thing. And most of the time you can do a whole heck of a lot to lead up to that point. And then as you do more, then the resources come your way. So one of the things that I'd certainly impart to anyone who's seeing this or hearing this is that you can always get a lot more done than you think you can, and then the resources come to you, as opposed to always thinking you need the resources before you take the next series of steps.
And is there a system or a process that Venture for America kind of instills in the entrepreneurs that allows them to get to that stage that perhaps the creative or the entrepreneur that's hustling out there can at least shortcut their path into getting that C stage or the partner that they need?
So Venture for America, we train people for a number of weeks, but then the next thing we do is we put them in an early stage company for 2 years so they can learn and grow and develop. And that's what I'd advise most entrepreneurs or people who are aspiring to be entrepreneurs to do, is go find a team and develop within that team. Because the founder role is something that you develop a certain set of muscles, but you can put yourself in a position where you're not learning quite as much.
Right.
Whereas if you're part of a team, you're almost guaranteed a certain body of learning. So with Venture for America, we put them in a position to learn. And then if they want to start their own business, we have a small seed fund and a little accelerator to help them. So we kind of put stones in the river, so to speak, and then ask them to take each step.
Gotcha. So it's not necessarily a company building process, the core foundation. It's more trying to get the people to like an apprenticeship almost.
Yeah, it very much is an apprenticeship, because that's the way I learned. I worked for a more experienced entrepreneur for a number of years before I became the CEO of another company. And that's the way most people develop.
Was there a particular CEO or a mentor that you had while you were, I guess, in Manhattan Prep?
Well, the founder of the company, Zeke Vanderhook, was someone I learned an immense amount from. He's like a capital E educator, and I did not fancy myself a capital E educator at that point. I was more like a lowercase b business person.
Sure.
So I learned a ton from him about the core values of running an education company. And from the CEO before him, Manu Kapoor, was a world-class team builder and salesperson. And I learned a ton from watching him work. So what happens over time, and you've probably had this experience, is that you end up with a series of voices in your head from the bosses that you've had. And if those bosses happen to be entrepreneurs, then you develop in that direction.
Right. And is there a particular lesson that you can recall that's really influenced you in the way you're making decisions, even up to this date?
Running an education company was perfect training for much of what has come later.
Yeah.
Where you get pulled in a couple of different directions. But most of the time, if you do the right thing by the student or the customer, then that's the best thing for the business. And that is something I try and remember every day in any context, where if you try and do the right thing for the person you're trying to serve, then the rest tends to get much better.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm actually in the education business as well with my company Rype, and it is hard certainly to motivate a lot of the people to learn. It's kind of an uphill battle. It's kind of like health and fitness. Were there particular things that you guys did in the company to, I guess, internally motivate a lot of the students or clients that you guys had?
Well, they were pretty self-motivated, which might be different from your student base because they were
Right.
spending
They were
hundreds
spending a
of
lot of money.
dollars
Right,
on
right, right.
this expensive course and these nice books and all this other set of materials. So
Yeah.
happily, motivation wasn't our challenge, and people took it seriously. So there were a lot of pluses to the consumer base that we were serving.
Gotcha, gotcha. So what were some of the challenges that you guys faced as you were building the company? And do you recall some of the discussions that you've had that you guys took to resolve it?
Well, the main way we grew was by trying to find the very best instructors in the country, where we were paying 4 times the market rate. We were paying $100 an hour, and the national companies were paying about 25.
Right.
And so we required a 99th percentile score and teaching experience. And the real pain point for us was trying to find someone we thought was awesome enough. And sometimes when we couldn't, then we just wouldn't expand to a city. I looked for someone in Miami as an example for 4 years, and then our competitors were making money in Miami, and we were just there being why can't we find our person in Miami? And then whenever we bring someone in from Miami, we'd be please let them be good. And then when someone was close to the line, you wanted to talk yourself into hiring that person real bad.
You're so desperate, right?
It's
you're
you're freaking leaving money on the table. It's let's freaking get there. But then you'd have to say to yourself, am I compromising in quality in some way? And so there were so many people that came that were right below the line, and it was agonizing. And I was the CEO, and so I was always trying to build the business and do what's best for the business, but then was making that compromise. Was that going to be good for the business over the long haul? So what we ended up doing, oh my gosh, it was so expensive. Where I had this nighttime conversation with this New York instructor, Dimitri, and then he was like, oh, I'd like to live in Miami for a while. I was like, dude, if you move to Miami, I will pay you this and that.
Man.
And we just had to live in Miami on the company dime for a year to try
just to get the instructors going.
Just trying to get the business going down there, and then hopefully find instructor candidates. So but it ended up we ended up getting lucky at the end of his time there, and then the right person came along.
So he spent a whole year just living the life in Miami.
Yeah.
Is he still there?
I don't know. I should look it up. Dimitri owes me a very pleasant year of his life.
Jesus. So you had this, I guess, challenging but amazing experience where you're now into politics, as I mentioned in the beginning of the interview. It's a completely different field. But going back to this question of you really being one of the few Asian Americans to run for president, why do you think there's such a low representative of other minorities or other Asian Americans that are trying to be this ambitious and trying to really put themselves in the spotlight?
Well, my parents immigrated here from Taiwan in the 60s and 70s. And their message to me and my brother was very much just to try and do well. And so doing well for most immigrant families, I think, means get a good education, get a good job.
Right.
And something like politics or public service is generally not on that list.
Yeah.
My parents were not that pumped when I told them I was heading this direction, as an example, though now they've gotten very excited. And so I think that very few Asian Americans or people from immigrant communities are in position to be able to think on a societal level and try and do something very positive for the country as a whole, as opposed to their own families, because many of them are in a position where they have to provide for their families week to week or month to month, really.
Right. So you think a lot of it is the influence amongst parents that are directing a lot of what their children are doing.
Yeah, you get a lot of messages, and it's very practical. I'd say that most immigrant families, myself and my own family included, just very, very practical.
Yeah, same with mine.
Yeah, and politics is quite impractical for many, many people.
Yeah.
Though in my case, I would say that, to me, the economic transition that we're going through is going to make it so that I'm not excited to bring my 2 little boys up in this country unless we get our arms around it and fix it.
Yeah.
Because the automation of manufacturing jobs led to Donald Trump as president, because we automated away these jobs in Ohio, Michigan, Pennsylvania, the swing states he needed to win. And so as we triple down on that, as my friends in Silicon Valley begin to automate truck driving and retail and all these other things, it's just going to get worse and worse. So I would argue that it's actually a very practical decision to run for president if you think that that's necessary for us to preserve the integrity of our society.